Hey guys, so I wanted to say just a few things to you about the poems you're going to be reading this week, which all feature the nightingale. So be sure you read in the introductory notes for this module about the sort of myth of the nightingale and where that comes from. It's a very popular poetic trope to use, and that is sort of what's behind Keats and both the Coleridge poems. They are taking this symbol of the nightingale and they're kind of trying to make it their own. So what you hear in the background of their poems, what they're kind of referencing is that long history of using the nightingale as a poetic sort of muse or a poetic reference. So in the Coleridge poem, he's going to reference Milton a lot because Milton used the nightingale a lot. And you'll notice, or I want you to notice, that he's really critiquing Milton and others that use the nightingale as sort of a symbol of sadness, or the nightingale, or here's the nightingale's song as a song that is sad. So Coleridge is going to recast it as joyful, and so you can kind of look through the poem for how does he do that. Another thing that might help you is with the Samuel Coleridge poem is to think about how it's structured. And I think it's helpful to think of him adding sort of a new ingredient in each stanza of this poem, which, because it's a conversation poem, it almost looks more like paragraphs. It doesn't look very poetic-like. So he's going to start with Milton and how Milton uses the bird to relate to nature. And then he's going to move from that, he's going to add a large grove of trees near a castle. And he's going to fill that grove with nightingales. And this is how he begins to redefine the nightingale from the way that Milton was using it. And then we're going to add a lady wandering through that grove at night. And then in the very final part of the poem, we're going to add a little boy. And that little boy's encounter with nature and with the nightingale will be crucial to how Samuel Coleridge is redefining the nightingale. With Keats's poem, again, you'll find a very different than Samuel, his use of the nightingale. But Keats is really thinking about human life, right? And the nightingale is what gets him to think about what human life is like. So he's going to kind of create a comparison between the nightingale's life and the speaker's own life as a human. So in stanza 3, that's a really key stanza for sort of seeing how the speaker defines human life. I'll give you a little hint. There's a great line in stanza 3 that talks about the weariness, the fever, and the fret, right? So you might think, why does the speaker wish to escape? Because a lot of this poem is about escape, right? So if we first understand how the speaker defines human life, then we might understand why the speaker wants to escape. And that sense of escape is embodied by the nightingale that he sees up in the sky, right? This is where we get that sort of romantic transcendence that the Romantics are so famous for. However, the speaker will, in a sort of strange turn in the poem, recognize some limitations to the nightingale. And you'll start to notice that the speaker is going to conflate what he calls poesy, right, or poetry, or the imagination, with the nightingale. So look for that after stanza 3, kind of where does the speaker see the limitations of the nightingale? When he joins the nightingale in flight, it's not necessarily all it cracked up to be. And then at the end of the poem, the speaker, I want you to kind of think about, what is the speaker wishing for? Does he wish that he was back with the nightingale? Is he now more satisfied with earthly life? The ending is a little nebulous, and if you're kind of wondering what's going on, don't worry. A lot of scholars too kind of go, what is Keats doing in the end? I don't know. With Sarah's poem, it's much shorter than the other two, but she does a lot with that poem, particularly if we have these former definitions of the nightingale in mind. So I would encourage you to kind of read through Samuel's poem, read through John Keats's poem, and then look at Sarah's poem and what is she doing differently. She also records previous uses of the symbol, including her father's own. But she seems to be using it differently in the last stanza. So really think about that last stanza. What is she drawing our attention to? How is her imagery in that last stanza different from her father's imagery and from Keats's imagery? I really look forward to seeing what you guys do with these poems this week.